Hey everyone, welcome to Cocoism, the podcast. There are conversations that entertain, and there are conversations that shift something in you. Today is not light, today is not surface, today is not just vibes. Today is a mirror of who we are, who we've been told to be, and who we're still trying to become. And sitting at this table with us today is someone who doesn't just talk about emotions, she holds space for them. A marriage and family therapist, a guide through the complexities of identity, relationships, and human behavior, someone who understands not just how we love, but how we're conditioned to love.
Hmm.
Please welcome the thoughtful, the grounded, the deeply insightful Tiffany Totah. Hey, everybody, I'm Boots,
And I'm Coco.
and welcome to Cocoism, the podcast.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Well, welcome back.
I love being here. I love being back. You guys, it's always such a pleasure to be on the podcast.
So good.
It's
So,
so good to see you. It's been a minute, and just welcome again. And just for our viewers, can you just share a little bit about yourself and your backgrounds to catch everybody up?
sure. So, my name is Tiffany Totah. I'm a marriage and family therapist practicing here in California. I have a social media platform that discusses emotional health and wellness topics within the Middle Eastern community. And that's been in practice for over 20 years. Which I don't necessarily like to date myself and really focus on how we can uplift one another. And that's pretty much how I roll.
Let's start with why queer representation matters. Who told us what we were allowed to be? It's been a topic that's visually constant, more and more, through social media, through politics, through really just society, right? And there's a lot of boldness on both sides of how you're presenting yourself and how you want to be seen and what you stand for and who you are and what your identity is. And on the other side of that, there's also a lot of pushback of what we're expected to be and how some people feel like we should be seen. And I often think about this line that's drawn in the sand. And sometimes to me, that can also feel a little confrontational from either side. It's like for me, I represent as a gay man, right? And I've been so comfortable with that part of myself most of my life. But now the conversation has really expanded and there's a lot within that. So yeah, it's been something we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic. From what he just said, like how does that hit you? Like what you have your hands in a lot of important things at the moment, and how does that resonate with you?
Well, I think from my experience working within a collective culture and talking about representation from a culture that there's very little representation, how important visibility is, and that in a lot of ways it equals survival and validation. Everything, because if we don't have representation or if this identity, if people may internalize it as chronic shame,
Yeah.
hypervigilance, internalized stigma. So representation absolutely matters in how one will see themselves versus being erased.
I see your point of view, and I feel like, as we know, social media, has brought us into a world that we can no longer escape, right? So when you talk about the visibility of whether it's survival or validation, it's almost like we're really like maybe up against each other, but we're really also up against ourselves, right? Because there is no longer a space to be for us to be erased, right? Like we are every community and wants to really be emboldened to like be represented, and it's like can it feels like it can often be just somewhat of like a war between each other because we all have this like belief of who we are, and those are really real things. I mean, I don't know. It can be so like intense sometimes, I guess is what I'm saying.
Gosh, yes, it's very intense. And I think in just acknowledging this intensity and how do we as a society navigate through this intentionally, simply. Human beings can take something really good like a good concept and go one way or like one extreme to another. And I think that's where people argue or they don't, there's not a meeting of, we're not listening to each other around these issues. And then people will go into survival mode and cling on to the old beliefs if we're not intentional in how we approach how people are reflected in.
Mm. No, I love that. And it's interesting how when we think about each culture and in the time that we're living in now, and how in some ways I can only speak for in the States, it felt like there was so many steps forward and like so much positivity with the underline of what the reality was on the other side of that. But now to see like social media and then Netflix making a documentary about a specific topic and and putting that stuff for us all to see, it makes me really overwhelmed because it all I can think about is like being a parent and how they see it and how important that is to have those conversations about whatever that they're seeing. Whatever, like for example, I was told something by our son and it was really hard for me to hear, but I also was like, let me take a moment and talk about this and talk about this. It was drugs and how this is actually not a good thing and why, you know? And it's kind of, they're seeing so much online and it's so dark. How is that, like as a therapist and from the beginning to now, do you feel like it's a different world for them because it's all right there, everything?
That's right. So the social learning theory or the way they see the world now, before it would be more through experience, through now everything is consumed or they're consuming all this media to shape how they see love, gender roles, what's possible for their future. And before it was I shouldn't say just, it was an evolutionary where you would just experience things and you would develop your own based on family messages, cultural messages, societal message, but you experience now kids are being bombarded with, I think somebody said like millions of just constant information that could be quite distorted. And as a parent, unless we can help mitigate that, social media is now taking over teaching our children versus that being a parental, like we're competing with
Mm,
social media as far as what we want to impart values upon our children. And so when you guys talk about queer identities or drug or anything really,
yeah.
that our kids are going to internalize these things, it can make them either fearful, limited, depending on their algorithm,
Mm,
or it can like how are they using the social media? And that's where it could be very, very dangerous because there's so much misinformation out there. And now we're seeing in the youth, it's shaping people's identity.
yeah. And even like it's fascinating because we had a question here and I just wanted to hear what you have to say. Can queer spaces unintentionally recreate the same pressures they're trying to escape?
Give me an example because I want to say yes,
Yeah.
but I need a little bit more context.
Just like,
Well, I mean,
yeah, that one I don't.
So I think what I'm getting from the question is this gatekeeping that will happen
Mm,
in whether it's the queer community or other communities around how you need to be in those spaces. So are you too like masculine or too feminine or too this or too that or not muscular enough or too and it's like these spaces that can have this over policing that occurs. And so you see some of the dynamics that folks are escaping from now is being mimicked, this control, this rigidity, this punitive identity restricting, even in queer spaces
mm,
as a result of, again, collective anger is a beautiful thing. It creates movements, yet when we move through it, not from a place of intentionality, it can lead to the question and these dynamics. And so where it can also have fear-based conformity.
Mm,
which is what I've seen in my practice, where people are afraid and they feel like they need to move in certain queer spaces. Like I have to act a certain way to be accepted, to belong.
mm.
And I said, isn't that what you escape from in your own family or your own society?
I totally hear you. I mean, I like the question a lot. Like, can queer spaces unintentionally recreate the same pressures they
Yes.
were trying to escape? I mean, because
Hmm.
it can be, there's so much when you're within your community, right? If you're in the queer community, which we are, and proud and happy to be, and but there's also like this kind of there's like the micro causes within that. And so like, for example, like if I'm an advocate for trans rights, and that's a big part of what I believe in and want to fight for, and have a voice for that. But let's say, my gay neighbor, isn't, and sometimes I feel like in these topics within our community, there can just be almost like a natural hostility if you're not all on the same boat, and it's like, and I know that can transcend into all communities, but within the gay community, it's like I find myself being hostile to my gay friend who isn't on the front lines of, advocacy for trans, rights and this and that. And and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like how can you not be, with us? And it's like, so there's this kind of like hostility, like just in the air, and it's like, whether we're all supposed to be on the same team or not, it's like how does one emotionally really like just stay grounded through all of these sort of different waves coming at you within under the umbrella of like your community and what you want to be a part of, when you're not maybe always connected to like everything going on. I mean, I feel like it's can be so emotional and like kind of draining, and it's like there's so much there.
Well, simply, I'm going to say this very simply. I think part of what we may all benefit from is understanding ourselves in and offering grace where some people may not be where you're at. And
Mm.
as long as, for me, they're not inflicting self harm, they're open, they're curious. And there's some folks that may not be open, even within queer spaces, or I know from my experience, that's where they're at. And the more you try and push, the more entrenched I find human beings becoming. And that comes from, you know, deep wounds on attachment. And, there's multiple layers that are associated with why somebody may not be as accepting. And can we hold space for all of that? I'm not saying it's right or wrong without
Yeah.
one another or fighting each other. That we're in a time where we need more unity and we hear one another. And can we not more? And that takes self-awareness and emotional regulation. And openness. And I'm finding more and more people are so entrenched in their viewpoints versus expanding, because there is a psychological cost when we want people to move in the same way we do.
Right.
Well said. This is a trigger word at the moment, but I want to touch on it because hearing you say that makes me think, both of you, what you both said, this kind of collective of like toxic, I don't want to call it people, it's just toxic energy, right? And the trigger word is toxic masculinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
From what you both said, and I just wanted to also stop for a second and just be like, the Cocoa Puffs, Bootsy Rolls, this conversation is like really heavy and really hard for me to like process as I'm speaking. So bear with me. But how does toxic masculinity, what is it when you hear that word? When the first time you heard it, like how does it how does it resonate with you now in the current climate that we're in?
So I don't use that phrase toxic masculinity because it's become, again, remember how I said earlier, we can take a concept that has a lot of validity and room for reflection, and then we take it to a whole other level where anything a man does is deemed toxic. So I like to move away from toxic masculinity now. That's how I've shifted. When I first heard the concept, I thought, interesting, there's a word for it. And yet, years later, I'm thinking, oh, there's a word for it. And we've gone too far on
Mm,
the spectrum where, again, it shuts down conversations. We're trying to shift toxic masculinity. But the moment you say, people are like, ah, yeah, you're just using that word. And so we need to reframe that differently because really toxicity, masculinity, toxic, feminine, it doesn't matter, shows up the moment identity shifts from something you live to something you have to constantly prove. It shows up because if I'm constantly having to prove who I am, that can create a lot of fear, anxiety. I need to have everybody validate my existence. And so, what's happened, I think, with toxic masculinity in particular, and why I don't use that phrase anymore is to say, what are the consequences or the implications of when someone has to constantly prove themselves in who they, it's like, can we move, like, what's going on there?
hmm.
There are societal reasons for that. And I think, well, there's no easy answer except I don't use that phrase anymore because
Yeah, I mean,
it's essence.
it's interesting, I never really used it, and with the couple episodes ago, we had someone on and he brought up the word, and it was since he said the word, it's like, I feel like it's been popping up, but it's interesting to hear you say that because it's like, it's once there's energy, like, brought to a word, then the word starts to then can then pop up around you, you know? It's a choice to then say the word or not, right? With any of it, because it's we live in such a wild time where there's a lot of that energy surrounding us, and it's hard to sometimes look away when it's staring right at you, you know? And
Well,
it's
if I Coco, what I think what's happened, and that's the reason, like, when you take toxic masculinity, something that at one point we needed to explore and take a look at, and and then when the media puts it out there or social media and people misinterpret and they start to go again too far on one side of the pendulum, then you have, that's what you're seeing today, at least in my observation, it's hyper masculinity in these manosphere movements, and that there's no one to blame. I think media plays that's why we have to be so careful with our kids in
Mm.
what they're consuming because we need, as a society, in order to upgrade as a society, we needed to take a look at why boys can't cry. What's happening there? And that's really where we started
Mm.
talking about or exploring how men or how young boys express their emotions. And then it moved to this toxic masculinity where now, again, people are fighting for their I'm a man
Yeah.
versus that there's, again, there's so many ways to be. Did that, it's, I,
Yeah, totally. There's so many ways to be. I mean, just in this topic alone, I love how you explained that about um how you don't even use the term. Like
yeah.
just relating to masculinity in general. There's so many memories from like early childhood, right? Of of masculinity, of masculine men and like what that meant growing up
Mm.
or what that meant in the household or what that meant within the family or what that meant at school, and it's like for me, like for some reason it it's hyper masculinity like through childhood was really like almost very fearful. It was like
Yeah.
something that scared me, to be honest. Like it was there was no softness about it. I'm in a big Mexican family. There's a lot of machismo, like in that, within my dad and my uncles, my grandfathers. And it was just like this kind of like, I don't know, like now looking back, like is it or was it like something performative? Like I always was what like in this place of like, why are they acting like this? And like, why does their voice have to be? so strong and forceful when they're speaking to their wife or when they're speaking to their kids or when you're being disciplined and that was my experience growing up and it really kind of caused this sort of really almost fear if I'm in an environment with like a hyper masculine person or if there's a voice that is too just too deep and, angry that really, makes me very uncomfortable, but it's also through, school, it's like there was always the very masculine, boy that was, in charge, that, bossed everybody around or that they were able to, make fun of you, and it's just I don't really know where that comes from, but whether it's just performative or expected within the confines of your family, of who you think you should be, or if it's passed down from man to man. But it was always something in my life, and it still is. And I was always happy to not really have those traits and being a dad and I'm always trying to really teach my son that's not a necessity in life.
I come from a collective culture where their survival was contingent upon this dominance. There were facing so many systemic things. And I think immigrant coming into the United States, I think for many immigrant families where the man had, especially at a particular time in history where he had to face so many systemic racism, prejudice, there's so many things, right? And so it may have in their survival, not only for themselves, but their family, their extended families in this survival, it was an overcompensation for their own fears and insecurities. And so it moves into from a clinical perspective, moving it into that they had to for their own survival. I'm not excusing it, but I could see it from a different perspective that there's this idea of dominance, hierarchy. We don't know what, for perhaps our fathers or our grandfathers, what they had to face to assert their control because there may have been so many things outside of their control. So the only thing they can control is what was going on in their families. And they were taught to emotionally suppress. There was no permission
Yeah.
because in talking about their emotions, that in some instances could have put them and their families at risk. They didn't have the luxury of expressing their emotions because their worlds may have been so unsafe. And so their inability to tolerate vulnerability. So if their young son was crying or even their daughter, but in this case, their son, there would the father could not tolerate his son having an emotion because then it would have to evoke within him his own emotions around perhaps a history of trauma or a history of um, issues. And so that's where expressions, I cannot tolerate your feelings, so I'm going to punish you. In some cases, physical punishment, emotional isolation, verbal threats, shaming, and then in turn, the young son learns these behaviors. And if you were a sensitive child, you you now you're facing so much trauma because here you're sensitive, you have emotions, and you're coming from a family system that's typically rooted in fear. Hypermasculinity typically is rooted in fear and in insecurity. Now, who you are and your attachment, now you're equating any type of masculinity with harm. So you guys mentioned the performative, when strength is conditional, I need you to be strong, but there's so many ways to be strong
Right.
that's when it becomes performative because, this fear is what's going to drive the performance. So now we're all going to pretend we're, not feeling things. And to say that I'm a man and men don't feel things, I hear that when I get a lot of pushback from my culture, not so much the younger generation, my generation, for sure. We're men, we don't have feelings.
Mm,
I said, "Really? There's all this war, all this chaos, and you have no feelings at all?"
mm,
Right. We may wanna take a look at that, because, again, strength is conditional, and I think once we move outside of that and redefine what strength looks like, we're not taking away masculinity, we're just
mm.
upgrading it to today.
I love that, and that it brings me so many memories, right? Over the last, like, 3 years, I've reconnected with my dad, but there was a long period of my life where we weren't connected at all, and I feel really, like, grateful to him now because we have this incredible relationship, because before it was all of the things that we you 2 were just talking about, and it was like, I had to physically be like, "I cannot be around you," like, at a young age, and then I acted like it didn't exist anymore. And then to then circle back and meet someone where they're at, and then them validate, what they did without me having to ask, and then have these conversations where they wanna talk about those things in the way that it made me feel, and the way that, like, he didn't know, and whatever the case is. But to be in a place where literally I had a dad like that, but I think in a lot of ways he grew up a certain way, so then he was just like, that's who he was. And then he got older, and then he was like, "Why am I doing this?" And then, like, really show it up. And I think that there's also that, like, it's never too late, you know? There's always an opportunity to reconnect. And to, even if the other person doesn't want to necessarily be a part of your life after that, there's still an opportunity to show up for one another. And I'm so grateful to my dad for that, because now we have this relationship that I didn't even know really could exist. And I think that that is, hearing you guys talk, it just brings up all of that for me, and how I'm, like, so grateful that now I have this relationship with a man that I didn't think that I was going to ever have a relationship, because of all of the things that we're talking about. And
Mhm.
yeah.
What I love about what you shared in the healing, because there was a rupture in the relationship, and that in the separation, you did your healing, your father had time to be on his path and journey. And it's in each of you doing your own work where repair can occur. And I think that's where it was talking about it at the beginning of our chat here, was it's about self reflection, self awareness, emotional regulation, understanding that people move in the world for reasons that they may not even be able to articulate. Does it mean we
Mhm.
excuse behavior that's harmful? No, absolutely not. However, what your example between you and your father was, and this is kudos to him too, because whatever his process was, he was able to repair that with you. And most people don't have that experience. In my
Yeah.
clinical experience, that that one person does the work, the other one is so entrenched in their belief system, they will literally reject and abandon their children because of their inability to open their mind around what masculinity is, how their child wants to move in the world, that they will reject them just for being who they are, instead of reflecting on if I had a child that's sensitive, what does that evoke within me? Why would I want to shut that down instead of being curious?
I love that. Would you, and please correct the house down, because this is something, I heard in the past, not what I believe. But I also feel like when people hear the word sensitivity, that when you say masculinity means one thing, when you say sensitivity, like, a lot of these people can think that that is an example of, like, femininity. Do you think it's, to me, I think it's equally important to, like, live in both your femininity and your masculinity, and, like, really understand that. But do you think that sensitivity is can for people to say that's femininity, to be sensitive?
Oh, I could see where that's dismissed. I look
Yeah.
at it as more of, you may have a child that's more attuned,
Mm.
more aware. They will have a awareness of what's going on around them. And yet and that's where sensitive does not mean weak. I think is what sometimes was, "Oh, you're sensitive, you're weak." No.
Yeah.
I try and explain to parents that your child is not, if anything, they are carrying so much because they're absorbing all this around them. And so they don't have the language to verbalize what's happening. So they're going to be expressive through emotion.
Mm,
So instead of the family looking at what's going on in our family system, that you have this child responding in this way, which more often than not, the child is responding appropriately to what is.
mm.
And instead of the parent taking a look at saying, oh, well, maybe we should stop yelling or screaming or throwing things or berating one another because our child may be absorbing all of it and they could feel to the depth, to the core of the dynamic and they have nowhere to put it. So
I believe that, I feel like little me was totally aware and totally attuned, and I'm that today, but it's like, thank God for that, right? I mean, whether I was perceived as the weak boy in the family or not, I was absorbing everything, and I personally always felt like some sort of strength there, right? Because um a lot of us, maybe as young people, are allowed to feel attuned or aware, and but it's like from that point on, it's like that could only be like a gift in life because that awareness and that being attuned to like my surroundings and absorbing what was going on, like, I believe so much that it just really helped me like live this life that I'm living today, right? And then I'm able to, I don't know, like be open to like how I want to handle a situation, like how I want to speak with you, like how I want to like connect with somebody, and how, yes, maybe how I can heal a relationship with a family member. And it's like the emotional side of and the sensitive side is like, I wish that that was something that was just so naturally just more accepted and like talked about in
Mm.
maybe young boys, or so that like they are feeling like they can do it all, and like there's not just this masculine persona that you need to be, like you said, to survive or to take care of your family or whatever that's going to be. It's like again, I always relate like my life to like my son, and it's like I am always just like, what an amazing life to have two gay dads, right? To have two men that are balanced in femininity, masculinity, and really
Sensitive.
sensitive, right? And it's like, I don't know, like I love that. Yeah, I love how you just kind of explain that, and it just like makes me think so much about, I don't know, like anything, like you said, anything's
Superpower.
possible. It's a superpower.
Like you're the in tune, that's a superpower to be the weak, whatever. I wish that I could go back in time and be like, how did we go to the point where we're naming not being masculine, a boy not being masculine, that is weak. It's just crazy to me because some of the best men I know, hetero men that I know, are so sensitive and so in tune to that and so aware and kind surrounding topics that they're not even necessarily a part of. You know what I mean?
that's
But
right.
like support. I just don't know where we did that. When you go back hundreds of years, queer was trans was it was a part of the conversation, it was a part of everything. And then, things got a little, I don't know. We got
Well,
to here now where we're fighting about things that it's like what happened to us just supporting and loving each other, like I grew up with a mom that's was her thing. She was like, support, love, like love yourself first, show up for yourself first so that you can do that for other people, it's like
well,
that's what I want people to hear.
that's what your mom instilled that in you at a time where she was able to do that. Social media wa
Mm.
what it was. She wasn't competing with the messages from social. So you were able to absorb that and have modeling of that, where now our children are they're modeled so many different things, and when they're vulnerable or if they're in a family system where there's no ability to talk about these things, then they may be easily manipulated into, again, the schema of what social media is versus those values your mother was instilling in you. And we become more and more disconnected from
Mm,
ourselves, nature,
mhm,
quiet reflection, where there's too much noise to be able to
mm,
be present to what do people truly believe. And then that's what leads to misogyny and, all these projections around masculinity. Now it's gotten to a point where it's defined in opposition of femininity versus
mm,
complement of what you how
mm,
that we need both. And
mhm.
that's what I think we're too polarized in so many things that clinically in working with my clients who it is a superpower. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
how do we get emotional regulation, stable so that you'll be able to trust yourself in that way. And that requires safety in a world that is deemed, unsafe right now for a lot of people in a lot of communities.
yeah,
Right?
you hit that right. I mean, it's a lot to digest,
It's heavy. It's
and
heavy.
yeah, and living in both and like in supporting all of it, in the way that it's like I want to look out into the world and just support people. Do and be and do whatever kind of life you want to live, As long as like you're being kind and honest with it, it's like live. And that's I just want a little bit more of that. I know I can only be in the space of this, us, the people that are listening.
Mhm.
I but I just want everyone to just try just a little bit harder to not bring people down. Just I don't know, it's hard, so hard.
What I love about what you said, Coco, is that so many of us are afraid of vulnerability. And in
Mm,
this fear of vulnerability, it harms our connections with one another.
mm,
So, what you're asking people to do requires vulnerability. It requires vulnerability to admit one's limitations, one's shadow, as they say. Young, we'll talk about to embrace all those parts of you that you may not particularly be proud of and
mm,
can lean into that to say, yeah, I am capable of harming another person. Instead of all this, people are saying a lot of words, but no one is really bringing it in. There's a lot of social media stuff, yet no one is really reflecting on how are they moving and what are they afraid to admit to themselves so that we're not emotionally vomiting all over one another, which is what versus what you're suggesting is to say, I accept you. I may not even understand you. A lot of it is people aren't even curious to understand why it's in the spaces. And that's across generations, across cultures, across gender. It's can we just take a minute to expand our thought process to say, just because I move in a certain way doesn't mean it's the only way. If someone is not doing harm, right? The do no harm,
mm.
people may benefit from being more curious. And yet there's no curiosity because we got social media and all this stuff where we can't even we don't even know what anything means to us because there's not enough quiet time to even assess that.
Mm.
There's not enough quiet time.
Not
That
enough
is
quiet
so
time.
so well said. There is not enough quiet time. I mean, it's like you have to, I have to intentionally like set my phone down, I have to move it away from the side of my bed. I'll walk into Matthew's room and he's asleep with his phone in his hand.
Oh my
Like,
god.
and it's just like it's just on and it's going. And it's just like I cannot imagine just lovely falling asleep that way, but it's
No.
like it's very he looks very comfortable. He's asleep, his phone's in his hand, and it's like it's just such an it's so attached, and it's like you have to have so much willpower to unattach from it,
Mm.
And, it's I mean, something I strive to do, but, like, obviously no one's perfect, and it's like, it is very hard to the attachment, but it does bring me to this question that I wanted to ask you guys. If someone feels threatened by another person's identity, what does that say about them?
I'll let you start with that one.
Well, again, what were they taught? So
Mm.
a lot of times they're just responding from a place of what they were taught, and that there may be rigid identity patterns for generational trauma. When someone, if someone has a problem with another person's identity, I would say, well, that's a you problem. If they're not hurting you or harming you, then what is it within you? Was it family modeling? Was it intergenerational trauma? Was it, patriarchal structures that maybe you need to take a look at? The social conditioning, the systematic reinforcement of all this stuff. And especially now with that manosphere documentary that's out on Netflix, it's like, woo, that they're creating, it's that person's fear. They're afraid. And I don't like it when I say that. Well, like, what are you afraid of? If someone, what's happening for you? What insecurity do you have around that?
Right, and is there some sort of, view of seeing yourself in the mirror? Like, is there
Mhm.
that too,
Well,
right? I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry to, yes, disown parts of themselves because I, in my clinical practice, I always take a look at, we're all on this spectrum, and you will have some people on one side or the other. Also, that's fall somewhere in the middle. I think there's some data that will support that. Someone may be deathly afraid if there's a man embodying his femininity that may be profoundly threatening to someone who has that disowned part of themselves. They are in a job that, that's not even, that gets reinforced. Oh, can't be, that's, you're a girl, or whatever these things, people will say, or even wearing certain colors. Like we've got people are, the younger generation, thankfully, I'm seeing it through my daughter's generation. They're shifting that, and I'm there for it. Like I'm watching these young men be more affectionate with each other, more affirming of one another, more loving towards one another, wearing their friends that are their clothes, like they're exchanging clothes between, I'm thinking this is wonderful, Satya, you know, like it's like, "Oh, so so's wearing my shorts." I go, "I love that." Right?
Yeah.
There's not the same stigma, at least here where we live, in our community, there's not that much stigma. So that's where there's connection. And anyone that's gonna, uh, fight or shame that, perhaps there's a jealousy there, or there's,
Mm.
again, an insecurity, a fear, or maybe it was so much suppressed trauma because they were punished. If they were a young boy experimenting with, I don't know, mom's jewelry or mom's clothes, and they were beaten
Mm.
growing up, he may have a vehement, uh, like reaction because it may bring up that trauma.
mm,
'Cause and so this is where we understanding, again, not excusing, not because this is where everyone has to do their own work. Why are you harming someone for wearing what they wanna wear, being who they're like, what's going on within you?
Mm.
My question is usually, "Who hurt you?" Like, "What
I love how you
hurt you?
you said
who
that.
hurt you?
Yeah, and like, what are you afraid of?
What are you
Like, like I won't go too far into this example, but I've been called a word more times in the last 2 years than I have ever in my life,
Mhm.
and this is a word that men use to make other men or women use it as well to make gay men specifically, I feel like, to feel a certain way. I won't say the word, but I think we can all think of the word I'm trying to, but it's, when when I heard that, it was a couple maybe 6 months ago, we were walking down the street holding hands after lunch and someone called us that. You saying like, "What are you afraid of?" And I think sometimes it's like people are afraid of people being who they are and not being afraid of what anyone has to say about it. Like, they can call you the name, they can do all the things, but it doesn't really matter to me because it's like, if we can take that from, like, like we had someone on and they said this, and I think it's really powerful. If we could take that from, like, a little kid or a queer kid somewhere, if we can get that word given to us, because we can handle it. Not that we want people to call us this word, but it's like when I hear people say that word, it's like, what are you afraid of? They're threatened by something that they don't understand, or maybe something that really connects to who they are because of all the fear they have around it, you know?
That's right. And I think it speaks to even a deeper issue of, what we want to teach our children early.
Mm,
That do we want to live in a society? I think over the last few years, why it's like going up so high and we're seeing so much hostility. And in my very humble opinion, what I've seen is we're breaking old structures. When I look
mm,
at my daughter's generation, I'm thinking, oh, this is there's so much vehement opposition right now because the old structures cannot hold anymore. They're breaking.
mm,
And this is why I don't wanna give them a voice or any power that I'd like us to for my own clinical practice, it's let's put our attention on the younger generation. That one thing social media in the positive light is it's connecting them in ways and showing them that we can accept people and love people, and that's where representation and to say that it demystifies whatever was taught by the family to say, this is 2 people relating, 2 people loving, 2 people that it's not what maybe their family taught them.
mm.
And that's one thing I saw social media doing is because of our globalization, they are being exposed to different ways of being, and that's where I see the positive aspect. If the parent filters and is mindful around the algorithm, really check your kid's phone, right? Check what they're watching, delete. If you're paying for the phone, you delete anything that they're watching that's not in alignment with your family values, and then you'll see that their algorithm will be filled with more loving messages. Because these algorithms are designed, as you guys know, to create narratives. And as parents, we can shift those narratives by being more intentional again with what our children are consuming. And if it's not coming from a place of love, acceptance, compassion, it's got to go because our new world is requiring it.
I love this chat. And I just want to take a moment before we close out, just to say Tiffany Tota, she's in the house and she is not playing.
I'm
So
tired. I'm
it's
tired.
it's always the best. And this is everyone's opportunity to check us out on YouTube, all the platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Instagram. So, like, follow, subscribe. If you love this conversation, please keep watching. Please keep listening. Please leave your comments. And I've had such a great time. I do want to.
And where can we find you, Tiffany?
Yes, you can find me at Tiffany Totah, Tiffany Tiffany Totah, M as in Mary, MFT. I'm on all Instagram, TikTok, social media. If you're from the Middle Eastern community, or even if you come from a collective culture, we talk about all these issues that were brought up today. So come on down. We'll continue the conversation.
Okay, all the Bootsy Rolls, Cocoa Puffs, all the Cocoism family.
And she has them. Say it. What are yours called? Tifties.
To the Tippies, to the Tiffany's, Tippies.
Tifties.
Let's all leave the conversation with something positive. What do you guys got to say?
Go ahead.
No matter who you are and how you move in the world, accept yourself. That no matter if the world pushes back on you, that somewhere someone affirms you, loves you, cares about you, and do not allow this world to change you because there's only one you. So keep moving forward in spite of all of it. Keep moving forward.
So beautiful. I want to leave with masculinity, femininity. I want to leave the word toxic behind and not validate it in that way. And honestly, it's okay, right? It's like like you said, if you're leading with love, compassion, everything's gonna be fine. And there's always that, be yourself.
Mm. And I would like to leave with something I say often, but I don't feel like I can say it enough, is love yourself. Look at yourself. Show up for yourself so that you can give that to all the people around you. Because if you love yourself and show up for yourself first, then you can really give everyone around you that full love that they deserve, but most importantly, that you deserve. You deserve to be able to give 100%, but that starts with you. You are the most important thing. And when you can show up and believe that, everyone, whether you have a kid, whether you have a big family, whether you have this or that, you are still so important, period.
That's right.
So on that note,
Love that.
you're too many things.
Tiffany, too many things.
So let's be
Too
too
many
many
things
together.
together.
Together. We love you.
Guys, so much
Tiffany,
conversation. Really appreciate it
thank you for being here.
always.